Hi, I'm Richard Mirage, Senior Minister at Unity of Phoenix Spiritual Center, and I want to thank you for visiting our website and for tuning in to today's message. If you feel inspired by today's talk, I really encourage you to make a donation by hitting that button below and making a contribution to this ministry. It'll allow us to continue these messages online and to do the great work we do here at Unity of Phoenix, which is to inspire people to live better lives. So thanks for tuning in, thanks for your support, and we hope to see you at a Sunday real soon.
How you doing? You good? How many of you have been playing Game On at home? Have you really? So for the last 21 days, you've been spending 20 minutes a day in meditation. We got one strong yes. Right? So that was the deal, right? That if we'd play at home, we'd spend 20 minutes a day in meditation, prayer meditation. We'd spend 20 minutes exercising, 10 minutes doing our emotional work, 10 minutes doing our mental work, that we'd actually do it. Because I believe that if you spent 21 days doing meditation every day for 21 days, it's now a habit. Like, you have to feel that. If you're not a meditator and you spend 21 days meditating, your soul is going to feel the difference, what your life feels like when you're meditating and when you're not meditating. When you start the day every day getting full from the deepest place within you, it makes a difference. And I absolutely believe that if you're doing that work every day, that becomes a habit that is a life changer. It's a game changer. So even if you haven't started, this week is our last week of Game On. I want you about it. I want you feeding your soul every day, 20 minutes. Now, I know you don't have time to do it. Do it anyway. Right? 20 minutes every day where you feed your soul, where you meditate, so that your soul is full every day as you start the day. Now, I live in a great neighborhood. And what that means to me is that I actually know my neighbors. My neighbors hang out. That we know each other. We know what's going on in each other's lives, and it's a great neighborhood. Many of our neighbors attend here, not because of me. I think it's because of Richard. Right? But many of our, we know our neighbors, and a couple doors down, their grandkids came to stay with them for 2 weeks. And it was so much fun to have little kids running around the neighborhood. They were here, they were there, they were playing with our cats, or when Kay's garage door fell, they were over there helping the repairman put the garage door back together. I mean, they were all over, and you kind of forget what it's like to have an 8 and a 10-year-old running your neighborhood for you, because they were on it, right? They were on it. So last Sunday afternoon, we were hanging out together, and Lou is 8. She's adorable. She's a little spitfire. Lou says, "Mr. Richard, I have a riddle for you." And I said, "Lou, what's your riddle?" And she said, "Mr. Richard, I want you to imagine a museum, a very high-class, wonderful museum, and I want you to imagine that you've been barricaded in this museum." I said, "Okay, I got the premise. I'm barricaded in a museum." And she says, "And I'm going to give you 2 things to get out." And I said, "What are they?" She said, "I'm going to give you a candle and a plate." And I think about it, because I'm not one, who likes to be stumped, right? Anybody else like that? Like, if you give me a little bit of a mental challenge, I'm in. I'm game on, man. Let's go. Let's rodeo. Let's see if I can figure this one out. And I'm got nothing, right? You give me a candle, a plate. I think, well, do you break the plate and unlock? And she said, "No, that won't work." So finally I just said, "Lou, I don't know." She said, "Well, did you remember what I said to you?" I said, "Imagine that you were in this museum." She says, "You know how you get out of an imaginary museum? You stop imagining it." 8 years old, spiritual master, fully enlightened right there. Okay, so my question for you today is, do you know what spiritual fitness is? I thought about it. Do I know what spiritual fitness is? Because when you think of physical fitness, how many of you ever took a PE class? Anybody? One person, great. All right. So, the idea, you run the mile in 6 minutes and then you get the little award, or you can do so many push-ups or sit-ups. And we have a concept. We may not do it, but we have a concept what physical fitness is. And mental fitness. I think we have a concept of what mental fitness is. The idea of moving from negative thinking to positive thinking, to be clear about our beliefs, being clear what we want in our life, using our mind at its optimum level to create the life that we want. We have a concept of what mental fitness looks like. I think even emotional fitness, we have a concept of what it feels like to be emotionally fit, to let go of the pain and the sorrow and the stories and the drama of the past, to do your forgiveness work, to let go of old resentments. We have a concept of what emotional fitness looks like. But what about spiritual fitness? Do we really even have a concept of what that would look like? I thought, well, maybe it's, you're spiritually fit when you can walk on water. Maybe that's the bar, right? If you can't walk on water, you're not spiritually fit. Or maybe it's feed the multitude. Anybody can take a handful of fish and a loaf of bread and feed 5,000 people? They're definitely spiritually fit, right? Right? They're spiritually fit. But the idea is, for most of us, we don't have a concept of what spiritual fitness is all about. I don't think most of us even thought about it. I could see why Richard took this Sunday off. Right? And the joy is I get to do this talk twice, right? So if I don't get it right, I got Wednesday to do the same talk again because I get to do it twice. I'm doing, never mind. It just sounds like I'm a victim, so never mind. So what the heck is spiritual fitness? Like in your life, if I said, I want you to join a 30-day program, and in 30 days you're going to be spiritually fit, what would you expect? Because what I want you to see is that we don't really have a concept for this. For most of us, spirituality is kind of a vague kind of a something. And especially if we look at the physical, the mental, and the emotional, if we take those out and we're just focused for spiritual fitness, what the heck is it? What would that be in your life? And then we use this term about spiritual transformation. How many of you have ever heard that term? How many of you have ever used that term, spiritual transformation, right? And spiritual transformation is this idea that we're going to be transformed from something to something else. Right? And how many of you were raised in a religion that told you that you were a worthless sinner? Right? Right? So if you were raised in a religion that taught you you're a worthless sinner, being transformed in anything other than that, almost everything would be a step up. Right? Right? So if you believe that you're bad or broken or wounded, if you believe that you're, messed up, right? Then transformation really makes sense because you're messed up, and spiritual transformation is we're going to unmess you, right? But I really want us to talk about what it is. Because if I said to you, I want you to go walk with me, right? And you say, sure, where are we going? If I said we're going to go around the block, that's one walk, right? If I say we're going to go hike the Grand Canyon, it's still a walk, but it's a very different experience, right? And so sometimes did I just go off? So, you hear me? Sorry. The voices in my head stopped for a minute, and I couldn't tell if you could still hear me or not. Richard lets me do this. It's such a crack up to me that he actually lets me do this. So, wait, I had to think where I was. So if I asked you to go for a walk with me in the Grand Canyon, it's a very different experience. So really, what would spiritual fitness be to you? There's a book. And I really enjoy this book. It's called Living Originally. And it's by Unity minister Robert Brummett. And the quote that I want to share with you is this, because for many of us, I think it will kind of understand the point I'm trying to make today. All transformation is inherently spiritual in nature, But not all teachings identify as spiritual are necessarily transformational. There are many spiritual teachings that do not point to a new reality or a new identity. Their aim for the individual is to function better within the existing system or self or reality. These may be called translational teachings. They seek to improve our life rather than truly transform it. Rather than point the individual to a new dimension, they point to a new possibility within the same known dimension of life. Right? So we can look at this, spiritual fitness and spiritual transformation, that we're either just going to move the chairs around the Titanic and feel like we did something, or we're going to actually transform at a level that matters. Right? How many of you have heard the idea in Scripture that you were created in the image and likeness of God? Right? Now, what's always puzzled me, what's always interested me, is that you could go to a church and hear that you're a worthless sinner, and at the same moment hear that you were created in the image and likeness of God. Like, how do you hold both of those at the same time? They both cannot be spiritually true at the same moment. You're either a worthless sinner or you're created in the image and likeness of God, but you can't be both, right? So for many of us, it's actually easier to identify ourselves as broken than created in the image and likeness of God. Because if we're really truly created in the image and likeness of God, it creates a level of inner confusion. Like, well, really? Then why have people been speaking to me this way my whole life if I'm really all that? Why does my life look like that if I'm really all that? I heard a guy speak one time who said that we were 7/8 of the way to enlightenment. I said, really? I didn't say it. I thought it, and I stayed within my inner voice, right? Not my outer voice. And I said, really? We're 7/8 of the way to enlightenment. My thought was, how do you know that? First I thought, that's incredible. I am almost there, right? Then I said, how do you know that, right? Because how many of us have ever heard the whole belief in self-help that our ego can heal our ego? Right? That our personality can fix our personality. See, if we're created in the image and likeness of God, it's not like we're almost created in the image and likeness of God. Like God's getting old and, we missed you and you kind of slipped through. The process wasn't as worked out as we wanted it to be, and so we missed. Our quality control isn't really what we thought it should be, and you made it through, and you're not quite there, but you're almost there. So I'm sure if you work really hard, if your ego works really hard, if you take enough self-help courses, you can finally get all the way there, because we couldn't possibly believe that you're whole and complete and lacking in nothing. But what if it's true? What if spiritual fitness, what if a spiritual transformation isn't transforming from being a broken self to a whole self? What if spiritual transformation is that you're always whole, and what's being transformed is a belief or an understanding or a perception that you're broken, and transforming into a perception that you are complete and whole and lacking in nothing? I am whole and complete and lacking in nothing. Will you say that with me? I am whole and complete and lacking in nothing. Okay, that's like a 2, right? I want you to really, what if you really committed to no longer needing to fix yourself and willing from this day forward to live as if you were whole and complete and lacking in nothing? One more time. I am whole and complete and lacking in nothing. See, what I want you to see is that spiritual transformation is moving from a wounded self-view, from a broken self-view, into an unvalued self-view, into a view that you actually see yourself the way that God sees you. That you actually appreciate that you were created in the image and likeness of God, that you are divine in nature, that you are complete, that you are a radical, wonderful expression of the divine. Now, if you actually believe that, if you integrated that, if you lived that, would that change the way you lived your life? For many of us, it would. It would radically change our life. It would radically change everything in our life. It would change our relationships. Does anybody ever get bumped by other people? Right? That one of the areas that we get bumped is that we believe that people aren't valuing us. Like, why are you treating me that way? Don't you know that I'm all that? But if you really knew that you were all that, no matter how they treated you, it would just be a non-issue because you are all that. You were fully baked. The moment you were created in the image and likeness of God, you were whole and complete and lacking in nothing. Now your ego wants to fix you. So if you're just slightly not enough, now your ego has a process. It has a problem. It has something to do. Its job then believes is to get you over the line, to actually finish what God started. But what if there's nothing to fix? Well, Richard, you haven't seen some of the choices I've made. Right? You don't see some of my crankiness. Okay. What if you're still whole and complete and lacking in nothing? What if you're really whole and complete and lacking in nothing? Would that be a transformation? Would that be a different way of seeing yourself? Would that be a transformation in living? That you would actually show up as the best version of you. You'd actually show up in the way that God created you to be in the world. I know, that's how I feel sometimes too. I just wish I had somebody to carry me around when I feel like that. Like, wouldn't that be special? Having a bad day here, please, just carry me around for a little bit. You don't really need to know everything that's going on in my head. Sometimes my self-filter just gets a little off, right? So there's this line where Paul said, now I look in the mirror dimly, but one day I will see face to face. And I want you to really see that as part of each of our spiritual journey. That when you look in the mirror, do you see everything that's wrong with you? Do you see everything, every mistake that you've made and every judgment and every way that you've condemned yourself? When you look in the mirror, what do you see? Do you see all your problems, all your flaws? Or do you see the face of God looking back at you? Paul said, one day I will see face to face. I will see God as me. That is spiritual transformation. When you give up all the limited, broken ways that you see yourself, and you see yourself in the truth of who you are. I am whole and complete and lacking in nothing. Will you say that with me? I am whole and complete and lacking in nothing. Now, if you were born and raised to believe that you're broken, can you see that it's a bit of a journey to see that you're whole and complete and lacking in nothing? If you were born and raised to think that you're not enough, can you see it a bit of a spiritual journey to see yourself as completely enough? That the greatest transformation that we go through isn't in actually changing ourselves, it's seeing ourselves accurately. One of the images in mythology, and sometimes mythology is a more accurate representation because it's just a story and you can tell a story, right? So one of the reoccurring themes in mythology is the idea that the king or queen gets separated from the castle, or the prince or the princess gets separated from the castle, and they begin to forget who they are. And the longer they live outside the castle, the more they forget that they actually belong inside the castle. They begin to think that they really are limited or broken or worthless. And then in mythology, there's always this time where there's a realization, kind of like the prodigal son, where they come to themselves and they come back to the castle. They come back to that understanding. They come back to their greatness. And they realize it was there all the time. Remember Harry Potter? So Harry Potter, turns out his parents, you don't find this, and this is a spoiler if you haven't read Harry Potter, right? But you find out that Harry Potter's parents were actually these incredible wizards, and that he was being raised by muggles. And there's a point in this journey where he has to come back to himself. He has to come back to his greatness. And I think that over and over again, This is the transformation. This is spiritual fitness. When you give up your woundedness for your greatness. When you give up the less than for the wholeness of who you really are. All right. So I want you to imagine that you're in a museum. And you've been barricaded in this museum. And you don't have anything. You don't have anything. I'm not even going to give you a candle. I'm not going to give you a plate. You don't have anything. And you're barricaded in this museum. So because you're barricaded in this museum, for most of us, our first response to life is to try to break out. How many of you would want to try to break out? You might look for something that you could find. You might beat against the walls. You might beat against the barricades. You might run into the walls or run into the barricades. You would do physically whatever you could do to free yourself from the barricade of that confinement. And there'd be a point where you would just stop. And then you might move to your mental self. And you might begin to work on your thoughts. You might begin to work on your attitude. You might begin to work on your beliefs. You might even begin to work on your resentment toward others. And you would do the mental work until you actually felt mentally at peace in that environment. And then when you begin to feel a little peace, you might actually then begin to move to the emotional level. You might actually do your forgiveness work. You might let go of the pain and the heartache and the disappointments and the fears. And you might do a level of emotional work that would actually free you from the emotional bonds that you've lived in your whole life. And then after you've done the physical, the mental, and the emotional bonds, you might just sit on the floor. And maybe for the first time in your life, you'd begin to meditate. You'd actually want to know God right there, right where you are, right in your confinement, right in the place where you need God the most. And you might begin to meditate. And I would suspect that there'd be a moment in your meditation where the ceiling would wash away and the walls would be gone. And there'd be a realization that your bondage was always an illusion. That you were created in the image and likeness of God and that you could never be separate from your good. And that you would heal at every level of your life. You have healed physically, mentally, emotionally, and most importantly, spiritually. And at that point, you would be set free. Because you'd no longer be trapped in the mental, emotional, spiritual, or physical bonds that have held you. This week, we're inviting you to finish playing Game On. For some of us, it might just be our start. We might just start today playing Game On. And the idea is that you're going to spend 20 minutes physically, 10 minutes emotionally, 10 minutes mentally, and 20 minutes spiritually doing your inner work. Because even if you do all the other work, but you don't get to the spiritual work, you don't really win. And it's not until that you completely know that you were created in the image and likeness of God, that you can never be separate from your Creator, that you win. This week, your homework is 20 minutes a day to dive back into God and to spend so much time with God that you are free. Will you pray with me? I invite you to open your mind, your heart, your soul to the activity of God that is right here, right now. That we are one with the One. We are one with all that God is. And the more that we come into our wholeness, the more that we know and celebrate our wholeness, the more that all the illusion is gone. All the separation, all the stories, all the dramas, all the fears are simply wiped away. I'm created in God's image. I am the likeness of God. In the name and through the power of the living Christ, we give thanks. And so it is. Amen. God bless you all. Have a great week. Thanks for being here.